Today, I have the privilege of sitting down with Akanksha Malik, data and AI consultant and director of Women Coders. This conversation was so enjoyable. We cover a lot of ground today. We talk about AI, how we can ensure that it is inclusive for everyone, how women especially are getting left behind and what we're going to do about it, and how we can all future-proof our careers. This conversation is full of aha moments, inspiration. So if you are ready to get behind the driver's seat of your own career and life, today's episode is an absolute must. I hope you enjoy and let me know what your biggest takeaway was. Akanksha, welcome to the Career Confidence Podcast. I am delighted to have you on today. For those that have just tuned in, can you tell us a little about yourself, your career background, and your journey so far? So over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I feel like we just randomly connected and it was like, do you want to be on my podcast? I'm like, this sounds fun. So here we are. I'm really excited. I am based in Melbourne, Australia. I'm a data and AI consultant. So I play around with a lot of those kind of technologies and have been for the last couple of years. As well as that, I feel like there's about 15 different hats that get put onto you as you start going through your careers. And if you get involved with the community, everything just gets multiplied outwards. But I run Women Coders here in Australia. So it's a not-for-profit community group that is really built to kind of help support women in technology and the industry itself. As well as that, there's a bunch of different things I'm sure is going to come out. But yeah, let's dive right in.
Let's dive right in. Now, I love the Women Coders. We're going to go there because obviously I've got Sister Club as well. So I feel like we're very much in alignment in terms of our missions and our purposes and things as well. But when you say an AI data consultant, give us an insight into what does a day look like? What does a week look like? So I think that would sort of like set the tone. So I feel like when people hear these titles, they come up with their own conclusion of what that means and what that looks like. But what does it actually look like day to day? What do you do? How does your weeks and months look?
I'm pretty sure my mother's going to be joining in at this stage to get an answer to that exact question. But what am I? So differentiate it. So when I worked in consulting companies, what that looks like is very much, if you're on a client project, you're very focused in on terms of, okay, this is scope, this is what we're delivering. On a week-to-week basis, that look like we have a sprint and everyone gets allocated, everyone picks up their own allocated tasks for that week. And there'll be a daily check-in of, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what I got up to date yesterday, my plans for today, and this is where I'm stuck. So it sounds and feels very similar to just a normal role. You're working on a project, you're working with a team within it, and you're aiming towards a end goal. The kind of with consulting, it's the fact that you basically move teams essentially every couple of months, depending on the length of the project. So especially when I've worked in data and AI consultant project, it's been a fascinating career point perspective because so I think I started consulting about 6 years ago, right out of college. And that was around the time where it was cool, but no one knew what it was. No one could promise anything. And the tech hadn't fully gotten there. So we could do stuff with machines and it was really cool machine learning things, projects we could build, but no one believed in it. So when you're trying to sell those kind of projects in consulting, because you're going to companies like, hey, we can see you have a problem. We can come fix it for you. So it might be you aren't really predicting when sales might go up and down in the next couple of months based on different factors. And we can come help you do that. And we'll be really, really helpful for you. And I'm like, okay, great. So what are going to be the outcomes? What do we sign on the line of that you'll deliver? And we're like, we can't promise that. We need to play around with your data and we need to see what's in there. And machine learning models, a machine might say, I don't know what this means because there isn't enough good quality data. So trying to get that over the line, and there's been a lot. But then over the last couple of years, when we've seen the shift where it's become so much more commonplace, and just the word AI is just synonymous to, I think, every single conversation I've been in for the last 2 years. Now it's a shift of, hey, can you just fix the problems? Just put AI into our thing and it'll be fine. Just do it. So when it comes to those kind of projects, the timeline of those depends. And a lot of the work that I have done as consulting has been kind of pre-sale. So we go in and we chat about those. So trying to sell those kind of ideas of how the problems we can solve them for you. And then we start working towards the other guard. So consulting is a weird branch of the world to try and explain until you get into it. But it's just, I mean, it's very similar to a normal job. It's just you do multiple different companies in a go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the reason I asked that question is because I feel like technology, sometimes it's the job titles that we give to people that can almost be a barrier in as well. It's like, consultant AI and data, that sounds so techie and so advanced and so scary. But when you sort of break it down, it's like, actually, you're going in, you're trying to identify what problems are in this business and how can I solve them, and how can tech and AI, particularly in your case, solve them. So what are you seeing when you are consulting for many businesses? And, obviously AI is the buzzword. It's it's the new cool kid on the block. What are you seeing? What's some interesting insights you can share with us that, businesses are finding or adapting or, innovating with at the moment?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of the processes at the moment and projects that I specifically work on, I can probably talk to bigger trends across Australia as a separate point, but what I definitely see a lot of, because I work quite closely with startups at the moment, and I enjoy doing it, or freelance, so I'm like, I get to go in and just have these chats with them. And it's a really fascinating piece because startups and scale-ups are at that stage of, hey, we had to just get stuff over the line. We got to here. And now we're at a stage that we can actually look back and be like, hey, we might have some recurring revenue that we can kind of make improvements. So that's kind of the level we're talking about. And going into them, a conversation kind of tends to be around, hey, we've got data. We just didn't have time to look at it. We don't know what's in there. Can you have a thoughts? Like, can you go in, tell us what we've got? What can we actually do with it? Is there anything worthwhile? If there isn't, hey, how do we maybe create a data capture strategy, collection strategy even, to kind of build towards putting in some of these AI solutions and technologies into our businesses? So that strategy piece of work is quite prevalent. And it's mostly because I think a lot of businesses across, and just even people, are seeing the power of AI and how much different changes can come in and just improvements into your daily processes. So that's a lot of the piece of work that I see and kind of do at the moment. But in terms of Australia's kind of industry-wide level, there's a lot of different kind of small case scenarios that you get picked up, right? So if it's a marketing company, they're writing copy for different items that they have to produce. So it could be, I don't know, like Officeworks is not a client that I know of, but I'm just using those as an example. And they've got all these images that they have to put up, and it has to have a description underneath it, exactly what's happening in it. Someone has to sit there and write that. Like, that doesn't just get created. But what we can do with some of these generative models is, hey, we would like this kind of a tone, and we want to have this length per item, and here are the images. You should be able to read that image, describe exactly what's in it, specify the colors, and some sorry little words around it that need to be in the description. So it's a lot of those kind of things that I'm seeing, which are really fascinating. But then for kind of small to medium businesses, we're still pretty data immature in Australia. We have data, it's maybe not collected correctly, it's not stored correctly. They've collected it, but it's not really of use because we might have needed one or two other things that we didn't collect as we went. So there's a lot of different kind of aspects to it. So yeah, there's loads of work to be still done.
There certainly is. And I guess my biggest fear as well, I love this country. I came to Australia 12 years ago from the UK, and I fell in love with Australia straight away. And I think that, I'm reading articles and things about, America investing $500 billion into their AI programs. And I just don't want to see Australia lag behind. And I feel like there is, a little bit of a concern maybe amongst the sort of tech community right now that we aren't innovating fast enough. But then I think it's also making sure that we are getting the foundations right. And you just said something there about the data, right? I mean, the data's only good as the people that input the data in the first place, right? And I'll put my hand up and say, we've a very, very small scale. We've actually just transitioned all of onto a completely different ATS system. And we've realized how terrible our data is. When we did the data transfer, I was like, oh my God, this is awful. We actually need to get our stuff done right. But what do you foresee? Like, is Australia falling behind? Like, is that the first thing that we need to do, is like start those foundational levels, build upon, like, what's sort of happening across tech right now? It's particularly in Australia versus the rest of the world.
That's a fabulous question that I wish I could be a lot more eloquent than I'm probably going to be. But I think we're at a pretty good precipice of it. There is an unbelievably cool tech force in Australia. Are we in any way meeting the demand? God, no. Like, I'm sure you can attest to that. There's constantly different like shortages and roles in tech, but it is I think more so than the innovation piece. What we're going to probably see in the next little bit is going to be the regulatory piece of this. We're seeing so many different things coming out from AI, right? Like, I'm sure, I don't know if you've seen it, the phishing has gone up immense. Like, as in, my business email gets an unbelievable amount of phishing emails. And I'm like, that's interesting because I don't necessarily see them on my personal one, like the same kind of one, like at all. So they're already differentiating it. I don't even know where they're finding my email addresses from. Like, it's fascinating to see that. Like, I think that email address had been live for maybe 4 days and I had easily over 50 phishing emails in that. I'm like, I don't even know where you found this email address to get to me in the first place. And that's not, I mean, I'm fairly tech savvy comparatively. I worry about my mom's gone the other way. She just refuses to look at anything. She's like, everything's a scam now. Like, even legit emails and messages that come through. But with generative AI, the power that it has to be able to manipulate things like that is huge. Are we doing anything about it? We're getting there, but also the tech is just moving so fast. But then the other end is like, it's generating all these things and it's learning from all these things. Are we questioning what data is actually getting pushed into these very, very large models that are taking billions of dollars to make with all these parameters, which is great, but also, is it? Because when you start thinking about it, it's like, okay, well, that data had to come from somewhere. Who owns that data? Like, there was a conversation around Meta using data that's available on Facebook, which was really, really fascinating because people were in uproar about, hey, you can't use minors' details. Like, no, we would never. And I'm paraphrasing, and maybe they've updated their stance on this. But like, the news articles that I was reading at the time was, no, we'd never use any of the minor images or anything like that. Like, those are minor accounts, we won't touch them. But if you as an adult, anyone over the age of 18 had content of minors or your kids or anything like that, that's good to be used. And there's a real piece around this of like data ownership and how these models get trained and what are they being trained on, that I think there's work being done. There is the EU AI Act coming. There is stuff being done out of Australia, especially I think New South Wales has built up an AI community, like a government branch of it, like to actually help regulatory decisions being made around it. There is work being done. We're just not seeing kind of updates around it, or like, it's not as like obvious as the cool buzzwords of like, oh, America's spending $500 billion, or DeepSeek has come in and it's slowly spent $6 billion. And I think it's a fascinating conversation to have because that aspect of money is always going to be there. You can spend as much as you want, whatever you want to do with this. But how are we actually policing and using all these things on the other side are just as important, because all of that set aside, and I think we're getting better at like understanding, this is becoming a lot more nuanced now, where it's like, hey, every time I ask ChatGPT a question, it's using this much water. Oh, okay, wait, should I really be doing that? Like, do I really need to ask it, what should I do with my day today? Or, hey, how are you feeling today? Like, as in, I'm not saying if that's what you want to do, that's completely fair. But having that understanding and level of what actually goes into these models in the first place, that piece of education, I think, is going to go a really, really long way. But I don't necessarily think we're falling behind. There is really, really amazing startups coming out of Australia. They have been. They're doing some unbelievable work within that kind of sphere. And just the other week, I kind of came up somewhere, I think probably on LinkedIn, but it was amazing where it's like, it's a startup. I know the founders are based in Belgium, and they are working on building insurance for your AI models going wrong. I was like, oh, I've never thought of it that way, because that is going to be a reality at some stage. I was like, oh, that's really cool. That'll be interesting where that goes. I don't know the details. It was a very brief passing, but there is really cool stuff coming out of kind of the environment that we have here. This was absolutely not eloquent at all, and I did make a point of that it probably won't be. There's just a lot around us. This conversation can go on forever, but there's lots of moving pieces.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think it gives me comfort to know that there are sort of agencies being put together to be aware of this, because I think, like you're so right, even that sort of whole thing you just said about Meta, all of that data being uploaded and those images, and it's like, what do we want AI to actually
have and not have, and it's something that I am so aware of every time I go to use ChatGPT, what questions I'm asking it, and what I'm putting into it as well. Like, it's something I am very consciously aware of, and I like to think that this is going to be a force for good if it gets into the right hands. I think that what my concern is around this all is that there's all this talk around the new jobs and what this is going to create, but I feel like we're not doing enough for the people that could be at risk of losing their jobs. So you said something at the start as well, which I just want to draw back to, because it's so true about the person at Officeworks. Like, there would have been a person that sat there before, typed in all of the words, uploaded the images, right? And they would have been paid to do that job. Now, why, as a business like Officeworks, for example, with all those employees that do that on a day-to-day basis and update all of their campaigns and things, why would they pay somebody X amount of money versus get a load of AI agents in that can just do this in a quick click? Where do you see it going? Are you concerned about the future of like people's jobs, and what sort of jobs do you think are going to be most impacted? I'd just love to get your thoughts and opinions on that.
I'm very much in that camp of believing it's just restructuring jobs. Your skill set is still important, like even that specific job, right? AI, again, is not actually intelligence. And I talk about this kind of all the time. All it's doing is like, hey, I've seen these words appear in this order before. The probability is this one's going to come next. And that's about it. It's literally just regurgitating exactly what it thinks will happen. It's all probabilities. It's like, hey, the next word will be this. It's not even reading the context beforehand. It's just like, hey, generically, these words tend to appear together. I think this is probably next. That is like most fundamental level is what's actually happening when we're talking about generative AI. So when it's things like that, when we're building out a description and a copy, someone still needs to be there making sure, hey, is the tone correct? Is this aligned to our brand? So that person's role, instead of being, hey, I'm a copywriter for Officeworks, becomes I'm a brand manager for Officeworks. It's a shift in that kind of context, right? And it's so important. I'm sure we've seen the impact of just brands getting tarnished. Not necessarily, I can't think of one off the top of my head of like an AI going wrong and tarnishing a brand's reputation off straight away. But if we talk about data privacy or data breaches, like anytime I say the word data breach, there's certain companies that pop into your head. They're never going to be able to step away from that. Like, that is a reputational damage that has happened that they can't step away from. So when you think about businesses, and especially that have client-facing or customer-facing kind of situations like this that they're trying to automate or simplify, they can't risk any single customer not having a good experience, or even just that one-off chance of it being like, hey, you can't do that to me. Because then it does come back down to, right, well, who's responsible for that? There will be somebody making sure the output coming from these models is correct and in tune to what they want to be putting forward as a business. So it's just a restructuring of jobs. I don't necessarily, part of it goes back to education. There is so many unbelievable different kind of businesses and charities and different areas working on making sure that education piece doesn't fall through. I know a friend of mine, Linda, she runs Australian Data Science Education Institution, ADSEI. Very cool stuff that they work on. I would recommend everyone to go have a look at it. And they've been running, and they go and teach teachers how to be able to have these conversations and teach children at this stage. And how do we talk about AI, and how do we actually have these conversations about computers and tech and things like that? So it's a really it's the whole grassroots piece of people are shifting, things are going to come along. Is AI, the rise of it, unprecedented? Probably. The adoption piece is unbelievably quick. Do people feel like they're falling behind? I'm sure they do. I asked my dad this the other day, where I was like, hey, have you got Copilot at your work yet? He's yeah. I've seen the word Copilot. Have you used it? No. This is not a job. He's like, I enjoy doing what the work I do. Like, I don't need something else to write my email today for me. Would I probably appreciate someone recording all my meetings and telling me what I've missed out on or the agenda pieces I was meant to take off? Yeah, I love it. That's great. It gives me the ability to actually focus on the meeting itself and like the conversations we're having, rather than having to constantly think about, oh my God, I have to make sure I do this and then I have to do this. It's different pieces are going to be impactful for different people. And there are really, really, really amazing kind of organizations working on making sure no one kind of gets left behind. And as I do feel like that, there are ways of kind of upskilling or changing into, or even just having a level of, this is what this is and this makes sense to me now, and this is how I can maybe leverage this or pivot out of it. So yeah, that's kind of like weirdly optimistic look on it for me, I think.
No, I love that. And I think it's important to hear that, because you hear all the doomsday things and you read the articles of people being laid off. And I used this example the other day on a podcast, but Salesforce coming out to say they were no longer going to be hiring software engineers. And that's like such a bold statement to make. And you just think, well, hang on a minute. But what's not then being discussed is, well, are we software engineering? Are they going to move into a different role, or are they going to be prompt engineers? What's their role title going to be? What's the restructure of their roles going to be? But people just read the headlines and don't read the text below. And I think that's what's giving people the fear. And, you mentioned your dad. I'd focus on my parents as well. Like, they are generally quite concerned about the future. They're like, the best times have gone, like back in my day. And they're generally concerned for like the youth. And maybe there's this tiny part of me that looks back on my childhood with probably rose-tinted spectacles a bit. I didn't grow up without a phone. It was the days where if you wanted to see a mate, you had to cycle round, knock on the door. If you wanted to watch a movie, you had to go to Blockbusters and get a movie and pay the $3.50. And then if you didn't take it back the next day on time, you got a late fee. I feel like tech's moved so quickly in my lifetime. And there's this element of that sort of connection piece, and without the instant gratification that I look back on my childhood with such fond memories of. And I think to myself, God, where are we going? Are we going into too much of a fast-paced world where everything's just at our fingertips? And has our brains evolved to adapt to this? That's where I come from, that sort of like society point of view. Like, are we going in the right direction? Is this positive for humanity? Or are we losing a sense of self in all of this? What's your thoughts? And I know this is quite deep, but
that's an existential crisis I have about once a week. I'm not gonna lie. Like when you were like, oh, like my parents worry about the good days gone. I'm like, oh, I think I said that like once every couple of weeks. I'm like, oh, the good old days. And it's fascinating because I can't tell anymore. I used to say it's COVID. Now question if it was COVID or just the way things have gone. Like my memory is absolutely terrible now. Like I genuinely had like an unbelievable level of memory in my head of like, I'd remember specific conversations and exactly where I talked, like over the years of every single conversation I had with different people. And I was like, oh yeah, we talked about this at this place and this, blah, blah, blah. I can barely remember what I did last week. Like I think we started the podcast and you're like, oh, have you been since we last talked? I'm like, when did we last talk again? Like I think it's 2 weeks. Can't tell you what I've done in the 2 weeks. Like if I look back for my calendar, I probably could. But I think it's just, everything has just skyrocketed in terms of pace. And so I've got a younger sister. She's 4.5 years younger than I am. And her experience of the world has been completely different to mine. And it's so scary to think of it that way. Where Outlook, I mean, this is such a small example, but like Outlook and emails was something she had never even experienced. So when she came home one day, like when she first started her job a couple of years ago, she was like, hey, how do I do this? And I was like, what do you mean? You just send an email. You just do the thing. And she's like, I don't know what that means. I'm like, what do you know? What do you mean? What do you mean you don't know what that means? But the same person, like, I don't get it. I don't understand this. But if you look at the generation that's coming out now, they've all grown up in a time of apps. They've never experienced not having an app to do something, where things like having to go into a website and like that's somewhat different, and which you'd never expect because they're in the digital generation, right? Like they've grown up on this. But the things that we found normal and like, oh, this obviously intuitively makes sense, is not intuitive at all to them. And even just those kind of changes and things are going to play a very, very large part, I think, in how we go through it. I worry constantly about how we're going about this. And there's a big saying in tech of go fast, break things. People say that all the time. And it made sense at the time because when you're developing things or trying things out, it's kind of just build an MVP and you can iterate on it and improve it and go on and forth, which is a great terminology and kind of an ideation for around software engineering, because you're just building and you're trying different things and you're trying different features and it makes sense. The one time I don't think, and I really don't agree with it, is when it comes to AI. Don't go fast. Don't break things. These are not things that should be broken. Like this really does not make sense. So I think as we kind of go through this, the pace scares me. Adoption is great. Like I think the more people that get using it, is really good because we get feedback and we can have that iterative process. But everything else, that's really scary when it's moving so quickly. And I think, I mean, not to get too political, but the way things are going to change over the next couple of years, we've seen the changes coming in the last 3 weeks. That's going to have a huge impact globally on how all of these different tech actually get used and where they go. Meta reducing and removing their community guidelines and what does and doesn't get blocked is worrying. When you think about some of the ways, some of the products that have been trained on Reddit specifically, that is worrying. I can't remember the last time I went into Twitter, but I saw a screenshot today and I was like, that cannot be a real screenshot. That's a joke. That's a meme with a screenshot. And they're like, no, this is live. All these things are happening as we go. There's a lot of that kind of work happening. So when you think of it that way, we don't know what the changes are going to be. And a really, really big worry I have going into it, I think at the moment, in the last 2 weeks, this is all I've thought about. AI, everything it is and it's being built, it's only going to be inclusive if it's being built by inclusive people who are looking to see themselves represented in that tech, or the solutions, or the answers, or whatever else, right? If I ask something to ChatGPT, I want to see an answer that reflects back to me that I would want. The way I have in the past, when it first actually started up, sorry, slight tangent. When it first became a thing on ChatGPT and I'd put in, hey, what's Pattern Cover? That's like my podcast. I was like, yeah, this is what this is. Gives me perfect details of like my own podcast. It brings my website link and everything. I'm like, oh, who hosts the podcast? And it just came back with like some random guy. And I'm like, excuse me? That's not what? Like, you're literally, you were able to find the website link, but you couldn't tell me my own name, which is in the website. Like it's everywhere in it. That's the host. It's like, no, a guy must have done this. Because that's the biases that are built into the data that's being fed into the models, right? It's just a small example. It's a funny one mostly because I'm like, how dare you? Blood, sweat, and tears went into this. It's mine. Put my name back into it. But when you hear things like that, and then on the other side of it, you see DEI practices being stripped and being removed, that's when things get concerning. And there's people who have had kind of conversations with over the past. It's like, well, that's over there. That's a their problem. We'll be fine. Which some of the business have said that because they're like, oh, these are US-facing services have decided to strip away these things. But last week, I'm pretty sure it was Accenture that said globally they're stripping away their DEI. And I'm like, why does it need to be global? We don't have this here. This is the exact conversation we just got terrified. And like Australia very basically just follows the same blueprint quite often. So it's a scary, scary world. Existential crisis, many of them.
I'm really glad that we have gone here because you and I have had, like what said when we spoke, we've got very similar passions. You know, you founded Women Coders, the community group. Want to hear more about what you're doing in that group. I've got Sisterhood Club. And the whole reason that I founded that business is because I was speaking, ironically, at a panel at a Web3 conference, 3 years ago now, about the future of tech and why diversity inclusion is so important in that. And I was speaking to a room of wonderful men, but there was about 2 females in the audience. And I thought this is case in point of like, we're learning about all of this new currency that's coming out and this new tech. And there's, 5% of the audience are females. And I just came on that flight back and I was like, well, what am I going to do personally? And that's how I found a sister club. But you've made some really valid points, which is the points that I'm trying to drum home as well, is that now more than ever, we need to have diverse voices at the table. We need to have gender representation in businesses because we are creating the products of the future that is going to be utilized globally. And we're not just serving one gender or one type of person in our society. And if we're teaching AI and putting all the input into as one person, as one gender, it's not going to be accessible. It's not going to be inclusive. And that's where I lose sleep. That's where, like you, I go, the world is just, this is madness. Like now more than ever, these two things need to come hand in hand to make sure as we move faster, as we move into this tech revolution, how are we going to make sure that no one gets left behind? But it seems to be going the other way of like, screw all of this. Let's not slow down innovation. Let's just go. But that's the consequence of that is quite scary.
I mean, it's not even, let's not have people left behind. It's let's actually shut people out. It's
Correct.
very much gone the absolute kind of direct way of doing that. And I mean, no one has a solution. I lose sleep in these times where I'm like, well, the world's gone to terrible, terrible ways. I was going to curse, but I'm like, maybe we shouldn't. I do that every other day. But it's like, what can I do? Right? Like, that's kind of, I see that, like, I say that half the time. So I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? But even the little bits, right? Even the small little things do add up. I'm not going to be able to change any of that. I know that. This one woman force isn't going to do much. But if I can get help, empower other people to feel safe in the tech community in Melbourne and Australia, great. At least there are women who feel comfortable talking about it and staying in the industry. I think Australia in general, it's great. Like, I mean, the pipeline problem, I'm sure people have heard of it. Oh, it's just a pipeline problem. That's why we can't hire women, because there's just not no one in the pipeline. It's so sad. There's no issues in the pipeline, because if you start looking at the numbers of women graduating out of college, we're fine. We've solved the pipeline problem. I'm not saying it's 100% fixed, but that is an issue. We're pretty good because we've got all the STEM programs in school. We're having those conversations at the right ages. All of that is working. And yet we're still saying there's a pipeline problem. No, because maybe now it's hey, are you looking for the right people? How are you looking? Where are you looking? What are you actually doing about this? Are you even looking? Not even are you looking? It's like, are you even bothering to look? Because usually not. The amount of conversations I've involved with quite a lot of communities in terms of speaking and things like that, the amount of times that I've gone and spoken at events and things, right? And you'll talk to meetup organizers and things like that. Oh, we just really struggle to get women to come speak at these things. I'm like, I wonder why. Like, have you asked anyone to come speak at your thing? Like, oh, we just don't even know where to find them. They just never come to our events. And I'm like, okay, let's have a conversation. Turn around, look at the community that you've built. Like, give me a TLDR of the kind of experience you have here. Like, is it an inclusive space to begin with? And these are all these kind of conversations that are important. But at a number, like just a statistic, women in Australia leave the tech force at about 7 years in the industry. So we don't have a pipeline problem. We don't have a getting people into, or women specifically into tech. We have a retention problem. And that, when you start thinking about retention, it's what is the environment? Why are they leaving? And it's I won't put a number to it, but quite a large part of it is, hey, it's just not worth the effort of getting promoted. It's not worth the effort of having to do 10x more work than the person beside me to be shown to be somewhat at the same level. It's not being heard in the same room. It's literally just not having any respect, or not feeling included, and not feeling in a safe environment at work. Right? It's a lot more than that, I'm sure. But when that's the problem that we have, and I know we're kind of focusing quite a lot on the gender-specific diversity here, it's an easy one, right? This is the low-hanging fruit of diversity. Let's be very real about it. There's so many other aspects of it, but if we can't even get this one right, what hope have we got of making sure racism isn't a thing, of making sure ageism isn't a thing, of all these other aspects? It's like, I've got friends who are unbelievable talents in tech, like as in have kind of forefounded a lot of the thinking around some of the industries that they're in, and they struggle to get jobs because they're like, oh, well, like, you're up there in the ages now. Like, oh, will you really stay around? Oh, you might have outdated ideas, even though you are the lead thinker in the whole industry. So there's a lot more, like, no, they're so much harder. And I say that they're not really at the base of it. It's just, hey, why don't we just keep an open eye and think and listen to everyone and what they have to bring to the table? That's the base answer, but it's not easy. And I think quite often what happens is we focus on the wrong aspects of it. And it's really easy to do that because that's what gets highlighted up into the headlines, not even media, just into the headlines. If that's the thing that everyone says and says it enough, that's obviously the problem. Same thing as imposter syndrome. Like, no, I'm still sick of hearing that word. Like, Ilona Maher, I don't know if you saw it recently when she was like, I don't have it. Like, I don't know, I do training and I work and I'm like, I'm good at what I do. Like, it is what it is. I don't have that. And like, we're terrified of saying this, which is scary that we've been conditioned to do that. But that's because we're constantly getting told, like, how's your imposter syndrome doing? It's not even, do you have it? It's how is it going? And I have that conversation all the time. So I don't know. There's small things you can do every single day, which if you are in a workplace, make sure that the person beside you is getting heard. If you're in a meeting and you notice that, hey, I'm comfortable speaking up, they're not, maybe let's make some space for that. There's so many small things that you can do on a daily basis that will have an impact down the line.
Oh, so many good points made. No, I love it. I love it. I love these podcasts. I ask a question and I love it when the guest just goes and just says so much gold. So there's coming back to what you said to start with, which is just so powerful. It's like, it's easy to sit here and it's like, I'm not one of these people that focus on things I can't control. I'm like, okay, cool. Can't control what's going on in America and what things are getting signed off. What I can control is making sure that I'm getting lots of diverse voices onto this podcast and I'm spreading this message about why D&I is important. I'm posting about it. I'm making sure in my recruitment company that I'm always going above and beyond to attract diverse talent pipelines, right? And you're so right. It's like there is a massive issue right now with women leaving technology, right? So the other piece that I can do is educate the companies that I'm working with around culture. We've also started a mentorship program as well. So we've got our big sisters, we call them, and who are mentoring other women in technology and helping them step up into leadership roles, because that's where we're lacking as well. We're lacking with some really key female voices in tech. And I feel like, you know, if you can look up and be like, well, she's done it, so I can do it. And I think that's a really important thing. Representation really matters, because I think I would have probably considered a career in technology more had I had a role model in it, right? So all these things I'm thinking, what can be done here? What can be done here? And just control the controllables. But I think what people do is they just focus on the big problem at hand. They try and boil the ocean and they don't actually get started on doing anything. So I love everything you just said then, and especially how these little things like making sure you give people time in a meeting to speak up, or if you've noticed someone's gone quiet, oh, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Georgie. What was that? These little things that we can do, being sponsors in organizations is so powerful. But in terms of, I guess, your own personal journey now, what have you sort of come up against? What challenges have you encountered and how have you personally overcome them? Because I feel like there's so much to be learned from people's personal journeys as well.
Yeah, I mean, this actually, I was just talking about this last week at first, and it was a really interesting realization to have. Like over the last couple of years, like just as a very quick overview, I did financial maths and actuarial science in college. It was not an easy degree by any means, but like it's considered like whenever I say actuarial science, like it gives me a level of like, oh, you're smart. I'm like, those 4 years beg to differ. I did not feel smart 4 years at all, but like, I mean, sure, I'm glad you think that. And then went straight into a grad role, which was a lovely grad role. Like it was a data science grad. I sounded very official and formal. And I was like, oh, and you worked in consulting. Like that is, oh, look at you up and go. Like you went to college, you got your first job. I was working in consulting, and a lot of consulting is being able to have these conversations and relationship management and things like that. And I was good at that. Like that, I enjoyed doing that part of it. I was learning the tech as I went. So things were just going really, really well, right? Like everything you're told, like, and then there's another promotion, or here's this other thing, and like job's done well, everything around the side of it. Like people are like, oh, you're doing great stuff. And that kept going. And so the last role I was in, I was the managing consultant, head of AI role, which was shocking. I was like, I'm sorry, me? And I'm like 25. That makes no sense. But like what was actually meant to be doing, I was like, oh, I've done all this kind of stuff. I feel comfortable. This is fine. I can do this job. But all of this happened at the same time as COVID happened, and all these other things in the world were happening, and I just never took a break. So I just kept going. I was like, oh, this next thing is happening. Let's just keep going. Like, what else are you going to be doing? And I eventually just got burnt out. So it was, I think, end of 2022. I completely burnt myself to the ground. And it's funny looking back at it now, because that's what I was doing last week. I was like, oh my God, I was a shell of myself. Like, I just stopped doing all the other things outside of just making it through a day-to-day bit, like part of like just where it was so weird looking back at it now. I was like, oh my God, was I really that bad? Like, I don't feel like that, but like it was wild to see that. So when I decided to stop and just quit and take a break, it was essentially a career break. The shift that happens when you say, oh, I'm on a career break, to people when they ask, oh, what do you do? It's really fascinating. And it messes with my brain quite a lot, because up until then, I'd always had a really good answer to what do you do? And it was usually like societally a very respectable answer. and a very impressive answer. And you don't even realize how much of a kind of value piece that you assign to that in terms of your self-worth. Where it's like, oh my God, like I'm doing great because work is doing great. And everything kind of falls aside a little bit. So like in the last like 2 years since then, right, it's been such a fascinating journey of like rebuilding out that. It's like nothing's changed. Like I haven't changed. The work I do is different. But the actual technical work I do, no, it's exactly the same what I was doing before as well. But how it's being done or how it's being presented, because there's no kind of company behind me, it's just my own startup. Very, very different conversations that happen. You're like, oh, I see. This is weird. And look, I was in a fairly privileged position to be able to quit and just be like, I'll figure it out. We'll see where it goes. Because I'd spent the time kind of building out like that brand. Like people who knew me. And they knew what I could and couldn't do because I'd spent 5 years, 6 years, whatever it was, building that up and things like that. But it's really interesting being in positions of power like that and going into rooms and being like, yep, no, I got it. I know what I'm doing. But the other people not believing us. So that has happened. Don't get me wrong. I've been in rooms where like, oh, who are you again? And they're like, oh, they'll be the person leading this project. And I'm like, that looks like a child. Which to be fair, I do probably times. There was times I wouldn't even question it. I'm like, I wouldn't trust myself sometimes. But it's kind of, that's where that whole aspect of having great workplaces comes into place, right? Like I always had a really cool team around me. I always had great people around me who they would do the hard work for me, right? Like they would be the ones setting up the, like, this is Akanksha and this is all the stuff that she can do. And she's going to be such a great add to your project. I didn't have to fight and do that for myself because I had people around me being able to do that. So there's a lot of those kind of different there's a billion different challenges, I'm sure. Like you had the same conversations around like a pay discrepancy. Like why is this person not getting the same? And like you face all those kind of different things. I can talk about whichever one you want me to, but yeah, they kind of come and go. And what really I think has stuck out is just the people aspect, right? Like if you have the right people around you and you make a genuine effort, it's not just work. Like it's great if a workplace is great and they have good people there. If you as individually can have the right support system around you, they'll always be there to remind you of actually who you are. And you're like, I think like you're a little bit more than just what you do as at a 9 to 5, like just a bit more. Like we do actually like you for who you are. You do bring some kind of other value outside of whatever you do out there. That piece of reminder and stuff does help in terms of then actually being able to turn back around the next morning to that 9 to 5. Being like, nah, this is just a job. It's fine.
So interesting you say that. And I was smiling because that whole identity piece is something I can relate to so much. And it's funny, same time in COVID, I'd been, in recruitment for 10 years at that point. And I completely lost who I was. My whole identity was, if I was having a good week, it meant I was good. If the business was failing, I was a failure. All of my self-worth and identity was tied up in my career and my work. And during COVID, I spent, actually probably took a bit, career break as well. My husband and I did up a Sprinter van and we took off around Queensland. And I really took some time off during that time. It was the first time I've worked since I was 14 and I was 35. The first time I'd ever not worked in my whole life. When I say worked, I kept the lights on in my business, right? And it was life-changing to wake up and be like, there's no agenda today. And I had to unravel these bad habits. But it was 6 months of going through that's now made me come back into the workplace. My time management skills are far better. I get less stressed and anxious, which means I'm in a better state to think creatively. I'm not sort of things that are coming up throughout the day don't impact me as much. And all because I'm able to separate what goes on at work versus how I feel within myself. And I think if you can come from that state of calm, collectiveness, just be like, this is okay, we're going to figure this out. You end up making far better decisions as well. But you're so right. Career breaks are, when you put it on a CV, people go, oh, what did you do that? No, we need to stop doing this as a society. And as a recruiter, you see it all the time. Can you tell me what you did? But it's like, well, actually that person has gone on and these are the people you want because these are people who've probably had the breakthroughs and identified a few things about themselves or maybe upskilled in something, So I love that you've said that because I feel like there's so many people that listen to this podcast that probably can relate to what you just said, is that a lot of their identity
is tied up in what they do. And I think that it's not good for your mental health, particularly because I was anxious Annie for the most of my 20s. Whereas now I gratefully, have eliminated all anxiety. I wouldn't class myself as an anxious person at all anymore. But it's because I spent all that time unraveling my sense of worth from my job. But let's move on now. I just want to hear more about women coders, because I think that piece of work that you're doing is very, very important. How did that come about? What inspired you to do that? I mean, obviously, I probably know why, because you said you're very passionate about women and diversity and inclusion. So, but yeah, how did that all come about?
Yeah, look, I think it was fascinating when I first moved to Australia right after college. And I still remember day one. So I think I landed in the country and I started working the next day or the day after. Like, it was like insane decisions that I don't think my body could do anymore. Like, that was very like, oh yeah, 20-year-old Akanksha could do that. But I walked in the door and I remember the office admin greeting me and being like, oh God, you're the 9th woman in the office. And I was like, in the office? Like, what do you mean? Like, and I genuinely up until then had never even kind of thought about that aspect of it. Like, I'd never really spent much time thinking about it. Like, I did a maths degree. And there were really, really smart people in my degree. But at the same time, like, there was a lot of women in my degree too. And the people I knew, I had to go, I'm like, hey, how do we do this? It was Jill and was on. Like, they were all women. Like, as in, it was never a thing anyone in our degree really even thought about, right? So when you're not really seeing that around you and haven't noticed it around you, to come in and be like, oh, is this a thing that we're meant to, what? We have to look at this. We have to consider this now. So when I started there, I was the only woman in the data team, bar the head of data, who was also a woman. I was like, oh, I think also this just sense. Like, like the grad and the head are the 2 women in the team, and everyone else is men. And it was just like kind of those kind of very different situations that happened. But at that place, there's people, like my first manager I ever had, Donna Edwards, which if you're in Australia, like, look her up. She's great. She does amazing stuff. And she was the one who kind of set the scene for me a lot, right? Where she was like, all right, this is the kind of stuff. So she used to work and run a lot of those kind of events. She got me into it. I was like, hey, I'm happy to help out. This sounds like a fun time. I don't know why this is an issue, but we got to fix this. Again, the ideologies of a 21-year-old, you think you can do all that. So that's kind of how I got involved with it. So it was Women Who Code back then. Also, I met Gretchen, who is my co-founder. We're Women Coders. So Women Who Code globally actually shut down last year. Kind of a little bit out of the blue. We woke up and it was gone situation. We're like, what? So we had a community of, I think, 5,000-6,000 members in Melbourne. We were one of the fastest growing globally for women coders or women who code. And to see that kind of disappear, it was crazy. So what we would do, we would run monthly events. It was a very static, like every single month, there'll be an event. We would switch every month. There'll be a technical one and a professional one. So for professional ones, it'd be like, how do you interview better? What do you do with these CVs? How do you do these? How do you have these conversations? How do you network? Whatever topic our kind of members were looking for at that time. And then the technical ones would be actual hands-on workshops. So it would be come in and learn Git 101, or what is AI, or how do we do, I don't know, another React or whatever different tech language. And they were always open and inclusive to whoever. Like, you don't have to be a person in tech. We're here to support you in whatever aspect you see yourself as a person who relates to tech. It's not in tech, doesn't matter. It's how you relate to tech. You're more than welcome. So when that shut down, I don't even think there was a conversation around us shutting down. I was like, okay, what are we doing instead? We just got to pivot, like, let's go. So that's kind of where Women Coders kind of came out of it. So me, Gretch, there's a bunch of us in the team that make sure these things happen, because it's not easy running these kind of things. It's always been free for our members to come in and join. So it's a free event every single month. We find sponsors that kind of make sure the events kind of run. There's food and drinks and things like that. We are proudly one of the first, like, that was our kind of motto when we started. It was like, it's not beer and pizzas. Like, that was our big thing. And we're like, it will not be beers and pizzas, which every meetup in tech, every meetup you'd go to was always beers and pizzas. And I was like, I'm sick of it. B, I don't drink beer. Don't want this. This is not feeling inclusive to begin with. So it was like, it's always been, I think we used to do like charcuterie boards, and like, it'd be like a bunch of different food options, and it would make sure it was catered to everyone. And there was always multiple different options and stuff. So, that's Women Coders. We are also aligned with Tech Leading Ladies. So it's kind of, we're trying to aim at that whole spectrum of, hey, you're grads and you're junior devs. This is kind of a community for you, and making sure you're supported in that aspect. To, we are in the middle of our careers, like mid kind of technical careers, and we need more kind of upskilling or more conversations around these kind of discussions that we have, which are different problems they'll face. And then into the tech leading side of things of moving and supporting women in their leadership kind of journey. So it's that end-to-end holistic viewpoints that we have. But yeah, for Women Coders, it's monthly events, and we're specifically focusing on kind of making sure there's a technical hands-on workshop every single month. So our event in February is going to be an AI one. Next month, I think, is some other variation of design. A bunch of them. But yeah, that's Women Coders.
That is so outstanding. I just want to take a moment because, I mean, on a smaller scale sister club, we've run 3 events the last 2 years, and they're no small things to put together, to get the panel in place, to book the venue, to get the food, the caterers in, making sure the AV's all set up, like, you know, and then you've got like the panic of like, God, how many tickets have we actually got sold now? Like, you know, people can turn up, like, it's a lot on top of your day job as well. So I just want to take a moment to say, like, I totally respect what you do, because I don't even do it once a month. 3 times a year is enough to run the events for me personally with everything else. But well done. Honestly, it's so needed. And, you know, you could have just shut down like, oh, well, that's gone now, never mind. But again, that just proves your passion to control the controllables and do something that is so meaningful and so necessary in our society right now. So no, I just want to really take my hat off to you, because that's amazing work.
It's very much, I mean, it's not me. I'm like, as in, there is a whole team of people that kind of volunteer their time. Somia is our kind of social media guru. Honestly, the woman does everything. I can never even keep up. But like over the weekend, she spent time basically making our t-shirts for us to make sure that we have them ready for a conference that we're going to be at where we will booth. Like, these are people just putting their kind of genuine time and passion into it just because they care. And yeah, no, it's not me at all by any chance. It is a whole group of people that make sure these things happen. And then even the people who attend, like, I mean, it's just wholesome. Like, they'll come in and like there'll be repeats, and every event will have like half of them are like their first time coming to a Women Coders. I'm like, how are you still finding us? How are there still? I mean, amazing. But at the same time, like, how are there so many more first timers still? I'm like, this is so great to see. Like, everyone's just so inclusive, and like, it's just such a wholesome like viewpoint when you stand there and you're like, oh, everyone helping them each other. And especially in workshops, when you can see them being like all pair programming, they're like, oh, I got this working, let me show you how I did this. It's just like, it's such a cute little community. We love it.
Yeah, and it is needed now more than ever. So yeah, these initiatives and these programs can't stop. Otherwise, God knows where we'll be in 5 years' time. But look, what's next for you? Obviously, you have achieved so much, and your career is just outstanding, and you know where you sort of are today, and I'm God knows where you're going to be in 5 years' time. Where will the world be in 5 years' time? Who knows? But what is next for you? What are you excited about in your career next? What are you working towards?
It's a really cool question, and it's something I'm kind of trying to figure out as we speak, really, to be honest. I think I've now been working essentially solo. Like, I've been freelancing and working for myself and my own business, which is really cool. I get to do all these amazing things. I get to go and run trainings about AI for other companies and consultants and things like that. And I get to work very closely with local startups and stuff, which when you work in the industry and you've done enough enterprise customers and stuff, it's very nice change of pace. So they're like, we just want to get this done. Like, can you just have here you go, there's the access sorted. Have a look at it. And think, oh my God, I don't think I've ever had access less than 2 weeks. Like, this is amazing. I'm just in here already. But it does kind of guess, I mean, you put a lot of hats on when you do your own stuff. I'm sure you know this. You are your own kind of pre-sales and your sales and then your delivery and your admin. Admin is like the bane of my life, I swear. Like, this is all I think about at this stage. But it'd be nice to work with a team again. So I'm contemplating whether or not I go move back towards that kind of work and just have other people around me, because I am such a people person, and I get so much more out of other people around me, and I learn more from it. So all of this was great in terms of, hey, let's decouple a lot of these values and beliefs and things like that and see what we can do ourselves and think. Like, it's been great. Real, like, solid level of purpose. And I mean, I will never regret getting burnt out when I did. I think it came at a stunning time for me, where I was like really early in my career. So like there's genuine things that I'm like, oh, these are non-negotiables now. These are boundaries that I'm never pushing through that again. So I've learned a lot of those kind of things, and I think maybe it's that, but the other end of it is I never thought myself falling into tech. I very much fell into it. Like it just happened to be a data science grad, and I'm like, oh, this seems cool, and this is the kind of stuff I like doing, and it just spiraled on from there. And I've kind of always been a believer of kind of the right thing will come at the right time, and it usually does. I'm very lucky when it comes to these kind of things. I am a lucky girl, and things just will happen. And like the conversation, like I'll go have a conversation with someone, like, wait, that really rang the bell, like, and then something else will come along, and things will just come at the right time. And I'm really excited to be back having those kind of chats and stuff like that. I don't know what the 5 years will look like. Will AI even be a thing anymore? Will we be even a thing anymore? I don't know. But somewhere throughout that, I'm sure I get to still be a part of how things move along, and a somewhat, some scale, part of other people's journeys in tech is probably how I see it.
I love that. And I don't think those opportunities coming to you are out of coincidence. I think, honestly, if you put out good in the world and you're trying to make a difference, then good things come back to you. I really do believe that. And so just keep being that bright light for us all, and bringing awareness to these important issues. It's honestly been such an amazing conversation. I've absolutely loved it today. And where can I send people to find out more about yourself and everything you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn, I need to be a bit better about it, but is the easiest place where everything kind of just stays collated. So yeah, most of the updates and things like that will just be through LinkedIn. But yes, and people do want to reach out and have a chat or anything like that. If you're in Melbourne, hit me up. I will always say to a coffee. I will never say no to a coffee. Just make a decaf. But other than that, yeah, reach out. I'm always happy to have a chat. And if there is something I can help out with, why not?
We'll make sure we put all your links below. But it's just been such a fantastic conversation today. And you've also given me a lot to think about as well. And I'm definitely going to, take a few things on board from our conversation today for sure. But thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.